So welcome to Monday Live. My name is Anto Budiarjo, and this is a show that we do every Monday at 3 o'clock, basically to help us get through the pandemic, trying to figure out what's going on, but also trying to figure out what's on the other side for commercial buildings. So the panelists that are involved are on the profiles are on mondaylive.org. And just as a reminder, the views expressed here are personal, not of any organization or company. Please do post questions and comments on the Q&A and the chat throughout this hour. And please do complete the survey at the end. Just a reminder, this slide deck that I'm showing you is actually on mondaylive.org on the homepage. So if you want to follow any of the links that the group is sharing, that's where you're going to find all of these links. So our agenda today, as always, we're going to start with just general chat about what's going on, news and trends about buildings and COVID. And then the main part of the show today is really a sort of discussion on the receptivity of commercial real estate to as-a-service offerings. So as-a-service offerings is kind of a thread that's going through a lot of these Monday Live shows, and we're going to be talking about how that would be received by commercial real estate, and to hopefully to address any questions and comments that you have. So a number of slides. This one's from Ken. Obviously, automated buildings. The August issue is now out on automatedbuilding.com, focused on communities of trust being a key word that Ken's been talking about in the last few weeks. There's a nice article from Therese on Monday Live Conversations. Scott has provided a link to a really interesting resource from JLL on re-entry to work, and also about lawsuits. So if you want to go in that direction. Roger's taking sort of a global view of what's going on, and there's a really interesting sort of occupancy occupancy tracker at this link. And these are some of the screenshots that actually break it down by a lot of the major countries, so you may want to take a look at that. My sort of focus on this is a report that I saw on McKinsey, and it's really to do with the global sentiment of where we are. And it's sort of captured in this little matrix. This is being the sort of the most optimistic view of the world, and this is being the most pessimistic. And everybody's basically saying we're still down here in the A1. So that sort of continues this trend that there is no trend other than, people are having different views. Mark is talking about cybersecurity, some scary numbers that is put up on this link. And Jim is talking about the relationship again with air conditioning and the spread of COVID, and there's some interesting links there. And all of a sudden, as I think again, we've talked about, all of a sudden HVAC is in the spotlight of Bloomberg, which is kind of interesting. Tracy was just chatting to Tracy earlier about this, kind of some scary numbers about restaurant chains. McDonald's, Dunkin's, Starbucks, Shake Shack, and a few others. I'm sure he'll make mention of some of this. And so those are the links for today. You can find them on mondaylive.org. So with that, I'll throw it to the group. Who wants to sort of expound on the stuff they put on the slide? Anyone want to jump in?
I can just kick off there with the slides there, that the stats they actually were putting up about the change going back to the offices. It looks like it's just not happening. People just don't have the confidence yet to go back. And that seems pretty much globally. Even in China, who are kind of ahead of the curve, still don't seem to be occupying the buildings that much. So there's a lot of reticence out there to go back, both from, I think, staff and also people getting the building in readiness for people to go back as well. So could be a long wait, could be, we could be looking certainly early next year or something before we can actually really see a pickup of people returning.
One of the other links I put up there was amid the COVID crisis, the global market for building operating technology and controls is still expected to have considerable growth over the long term, even though we all know 2020 is definitely going to be a challenging year. Some of the latest stats are showing that that the building operating technology and controls market will reach 54.9 billion in 2023 and 109 billion in 2026. Supplement that with the facility management side of it. They're predicting that the growth is going to average roughly 12.5% and reach over 1.6 trillion, that's with a T, by 2027. So even though I think we're, in challenging times right now, I think there is a good, bright future for us all.
Mark, was there any indication whether that was new construction or anything? Because obviously I think there's a general feeling that after the kind of backlog or what's in the pipeline now, there may well be a dip in new construction for a while. I mean, are they talking about retrofit, refurbishment, or just?
They were, unfortunately, they weren't, where I got this information, they weren't specific. To me, for those types of numbers, it would have to be both new and retrofit.
If I could kind of piggyback on that a little bit on the retail space and some of the reading I've been doing and some of the numbers Anto put up that I showed. One of the things that has become clear to us is there are long-term changes here at play. I think generally we would probably all agree that once, and somebody made a comment in the chat box about this, once there is a vaccine, we could see some accelerated change in thinking in terms of returning to the workspace and so forth. But in the restaurant space in particular, the way that we've been feeling and kind of indications we've been given is the damage is done now. And they're closing down so many locations that there will be a kind of a new model and a new way of thinking about locations and expansion and growth in that industry for probably a long time to come. This isn't something that, that industry, that segment of real estate and buildings is not going to bounce back in the same way necessarily as commercial buildings are going to, it looks like at this point.
And I'll just add to that, Tracy, we, my wife and I met up with her grandmother over the weekend and went to lunch in a retail outlet mall, not an outlet mall, but a retail outdoor mall called South Glen here in Denver. And I would say probably every fourth store was shuttered. And that's a fairly new retail development. It's certainly less than 8 years old. So yeah, it's definitely going to change. And to Ken's comment that he's been talking about are we going to see employment centers or city centers and people living around those areas? And will we see these buildings repurposed into more of a employment opportunity? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think there has to be some significant creativity with how to repurpose. And we did a session about this a while ago, and I think it will work, quite honestly, how to repurpose retail space, because that the industry, if you step outside of restaurants for a second, retail in general was already headed for a hard time, right? Yep. Pre-pandemic, online shopping was just kind of doing too much damage to physical locations. So you know, they get a little bit of a jump start on how to rethink how they're going to do business as a whole. And if you read into some of the links in my slide a little bit deeper, you'll find that industry insiders, you know, will kind of tell you this is a perfect excuse for them to kind of clean house. So they're targeting getting rid of all the poor performing, like McDonald's is shutting down and focusing on all the Walmart locations and all the poor performing locations. So it's from that standpoint, you know, they were probably headed that way to begin with. They were just doing it slowly previously. And this has accelerated a bunch of that kind of activity and given management, you know, the perfect excuse or reason or, you know, justification to make changes that they may have wanted to do even pre-pandemic.
I agree.
I'm starting to see in this building on the trust, we're starting to see the communities of trust and the communities of competencies starting to combine. This is an interesting trend, I think. We're starting to see people who have deep IT roots combining with our industry. We're starting to see technology extenders, and I think that's going to be a trend for us going forward. Is companies are going to take the best of their jam and mix it with our peanut butter, and there's going to be some strange bedfellows evolving out of all of this.
I noticed on Control Trends this week, it was Fred Gordy again, and he brought on to Eric and Ken's show the person at Intelligent Buildings most in charge of IT. But anyway, I was surprised how many times he used the word trust, and it made me think of you, Ken, about building. And so it's almost exactly what you're saying. He was an IT guy. It was Fred Gordy, so it was all about cybersecurity, and he just kept hammering home this word about building owners and gaining trust. And
sorry, I think
if anybody else watched it, it was a good one.
I think one of the problems we've got is everything is evolving so rapidly, and excuse me, and so much with so much complexity that we simply have to make some real tough decisions quickly. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to evaluate whether I trust that person. Do I trust Microsoft? Do I trust Google? Do I trust the various vendors? And then when they combine with two people I trust, that starts to give me a better feeling. So it's an interesting commodity that we're starting to work in here. We all on this page are here because we have companies of trust. And I think it's going to be a more important thing, but I think it's the fact that we're kind of forced to make these decisions really quickly, and we can't really totally analyze the technologies, and we don't really know what the outcomes are going to be. So we know if we go into the field with somebody we can trust and somebody that's not going to take the ball and run away with it, then we feel more comfortable.
You
So
know,
William Knoll on the chat, I was just going to say, posing the question whether things like movie theaters and school buses and nightclubs, will they continue to exist?
You know, I kind of building on what Ken was saying, when it comes to trust, I think that's there's layers, implied layers of trust here, right? It's one thing to trust the facility and whomever is maintaining, owning, or designing, architecting systems that keep us safe from our industry standpoint. But the thing that I have seen that have made me uncomfortable as I've ventured out a little bit into the wild, I'm rarely worried about the facilities. It's always the 10 people who insist on standing 3 feet away from me and have no masks or anything on, So I think there's going to be this combining of the facility part of it, the physical space piece of it, and society, or if you're in the workplace, the employer. What are they doing to enforce these kinds of things?
So Carol Lamonaco had mentioned about the impact of vaccines. And, you know, what do we think? Because that to me is a trust issue. So if the vaccine is available and it works, similar to how the flu vaccine works today, is available today, I think it changes the whole psychology. You know, we're very hung up right now in COVID in terms of the number of cases that are reported every day. In the flu season, you're talking about 200,000 cases a day worldwide. So, I mean, it dwarfs the numbers that we're seeing in COVID right now. So, but you would think, you know, you think COVID is this huge problem. Well, the problem is there's no vaccine. So people don't have a way to do anything proactively to address their personal risk other than stay away. And like you said, Tracy, you go outside and you want to stay away and you can't because there's people who violate your space. So what do you do, right? So I think once the vaccine is available and assuming it works, then I think the whole psychology shifts again and people go back to normal in terms of their behavior. But until that happens, I would say all this effort to try to make the building safe, to make school bus safe, all that is almost meaningless until we get a vaccine. Yeah. That's my
but the other thing that evolves out of that is this trust again, is you tend to go to places where you trust that the people will practice social distancing or masks. And so if you have concerns about going to a place where that doesn't occur, then you're going to probably back away from that.
Sure.
In
the short term, for sure. Yeah.
I predict when the vaccines start to hit, another trust issue, if you will, and another battle, another social debate. You know how many times I've debated with people about flu shots? And even employees who I always encourage to do everything they can to stay working and not lose your PTO days because you're out for something as silly as the flu. And, you know, when it's flu season, best practices around the office, that kind of stuff. And they just don't believe it. So they don't do it. They don't believe in the flu shot. And I wonder if we're going to, there's two things here that we were talking about this the other day at the office. Two things. One is there going to be this group of people who don't believe in the vaccine because they never believed in the virus to begin with? There's still a large number of individuals out there who are kind of in that group. And so we're going to have to battle that. And then the second thing that my wife and I were talking about is there are so many different vaccines coming out. How do you know which ones to take when and which are most effective? And is that going to cause a hesitancy, or maybe not? Maybe everyone will just go after whatever one is available today. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that or not. But there's another whole social element, I think, that we're going to go through here still.
From one of our articles, one of the advice was few faces in large spaces. And that sort of gets me. And I think that's going to be our tendency for the next year, is to basically try and find those places where we can get the distance and stay out of the crowds. The density seems to, if you follow the whole thing and you just look at it compared to density, there's certainly a strong relationship there. So I think, but all this is going to bring a lot of change. There's no doubt about that. Everything's going to change.
So I'd like to ask the group this. Let's get it back to buildings. All right, that's what we're in here for, and maybe go around and ask this, and start with Anto, and then go to the group. Ask one question and one answer. Do you believe we are past the crisis mode with respect to buildings and in a execution mode to make our buildings trusted, whatever you want to call it? Anto.
I don't think so.
Tracy.
No, I don't. I think it's a secondary thing that's going to come after we solve the social problem.
Scott. You're muted.
That was a shake of the head.
Yeah, the head was pretty clear.
Oh, yeah, okay,
no. Sorry, okay. No, we're definitely not.
Jim Butler.
No, not yet.
Mr. Sinclair.
We're afraid of the USA. we are living in fear of the USA. We're trying to hold you at the border.
No politics. Okay, that's all right. Leighton.
Not even close. So many segments of the industry involve people getting together for business, work, and pleasure. Until people are comfortable getting together for there's not going to happen.
Roger.
I think we're some way off, and we're even further away than Canada, right? But yeah, we're some way off. I think there's just no confidence from any
Steve?
side at the moment.
All right.
Yeah, I
thanks.
agree.
So again, we are still in crisis mode. Okay. Therese.
Yes, no, I mean, Australia this weekend, you know, the Southern Hemisphere, again, there's certainly another wave that's going to come when regular flus come. And I think how we administer the vaccine, with so many people losing their jobs, yeah, a lot of that comes with having regular health care, and that's not solved. So
Okay.
there's a lot of problems.
One word.
We got two. Yeah, one word. We got two more. Anno.
No, and I'm taking my indicators from what's happening in APAC, who thought they were going back and are not. So we're not even close to that.
Alper?
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. So basically the consensus of this group is essentially we're still in the crisis mode with respect to our buildings versus an execution mode.
Yeah, it's hard to get to the buildings with all of this overshadowing people problem, right? For lack of a better way to describe it. We were doing a deployment in Asia, in Hong Kong specifically, and it was stalled back earlier in the spring for a little bit, and then it was back on track, and we were starting to spin up plans for deployment, and last week it was put on hold again.
Wow.
Because they're starting to have rising cases in Hong Kong. So
Okay.
I can't even focus on the buildings until some of this.
So Mark, did you have a sort of a follow-up to that? I mean, that's an interesting little poll.
No, I think what I'd like to suggest is as we have these, maybe once a month or whatever,
Right.
is we start asking the same thing to see if our views. Now, for me, I feel we're at a start. Are we there yet? No, I concur with the rest of this group. But I'm beginning to see that we have made some progress, and you know, you're seeing buildings open up again and so forth and so on. And again, I'm looking at it from the building perspective, not in the wild, you know, the bigger.
Does the follow-up question though, Mark, is, and I understand your question from the perspective of the building owner operator, but I'm not getting any sense from the occupants, tenants, people who are in the buildings that it's a bit of a so what situation at the moment. They seem to have figured it out. We're doing, those who aren't dependent on buildings are doing just fine, and you know, we'll get there when we get there type of thing.
I agree. I agree with that.
Mark, don't you think this is also relative to the type of business? So certainly the restaurants have, they're on the negative side of it. But, you know, when you look at the Home Depots and the Lowe's, they're very busy and active. My branch banks, I go in there, it's just sort of business as usual. Grocery stores, of course. So there's a certain type of retail that is adapted well and doesn't seem to be all that affected. People are putting, I don't know where I go, people put their masks on, and all the examples I just showed, and outside the buildings is, from a retail perspective, is pretty darn normal. So that's what I'm seeing in a slice of the pie here. You know, I can't speak for office buildings because I don't go downtown to Richmond anymore, and my feeling is probably pretty empty, but I don't know that.
You know, one of the things that we've seen in our business is what I would qualify as an anticipation still. You know, we had an anticipation a while ago, and then it got kind of thwarted as, you know, the numbers started to rise again. But now the anticipation is coming around the announcement of the trials of vaccines and so forth. And I am seeing some hope and some activity. around the fact that, look, we can kind of start to see the light at the end of the tunnel here, and it's not a train coming at us. So let's start laying plans here for really having our buildings ready again. So I am starting to see a little bit of that activity in our business. So that's a positive sign.
Yeah, there are pilots being done for sure. I agree with Mark on that side. But
so probably the best way to sort of encapsulate your question is that no, we're not anywhere near getting over it, but we're increasing our preparations in terms of understanding what's likely to happen, and that's not a bad thing at all. But we just don't. The timeline is just completely unknown. I think that's the problem. We don't know if it's 3 months or a year, and that's.
I think comment I'd like to make is I'm totally impressed with our adaptation. I think we are doing well at that. We're starting to see solutions and workarounds that you know, our goal is to get the buildings open, but in addition, there's some of the problems that have to be solved. One example would be, I think now in Canada, the doctors can be paid for a medic or like a Zoom visit rather than you have to go to their offices. And so we're starting to see that the whole medical thing shift over, which is basically releasing a whole bunch of resources. A lot of things I'm seeing are positive. You know, we're basically fixing broken infrastructure.
So we probably should move on to our sort of main topic of the day. And this is sort of on the as a service kind of conversations that we've been having for the last few weeks on this and on other conversations. And really the question that we sort of were discussing last week in our sort of planning call is, we're talking about as a service, and we're trying to sort of figure out the barriers, which is what we did last week, and various other things. But is it something that is going to be easy to deploy? In other words, are the customers open to this way of doing business? And that's kind of what we'd like to talk about the rest of this show. I am expecting to be joined by Jim Young from Realcomm. He said he's going to join us about 1:30 the hour. So look forward to that. But anybody want to sort of chime in and start the conversation? Scott, you're probably the closest in terms of somebody that, sorry to pick on you, that's somebody that's actually doing as a service, as a sort of in the normal course of events. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So, you know, we're kind of the odd ball in that back in '99 we were selling it as a service back then already, and so I think that we're seeing an acceleration of some of the services that we're offering to our clients. Some of that has to do with some consolidation within the company, and now having the access to some of the other services that some of the other groups were offering. Now I can offer those to my customers as well. But just getting back to the numbers, I mean, we are seeing an uptick in our direct clients, and most of their numbers are back to normal from a work order request perspective. But as a service, we don't get, there's a difference though. We're truly a software as a service. There is no hardware that we have to install. And so from a BAS perspective, that I think has always been the hurdle, is we've got this hardware component that has to be installed in a building to get that data out, then to do something with it.
I kind of would have expected you to be even busier, Scott, with buildings starting up and, plant failing and things, needing adjusting. I would have expected even beyond, the normal kind of, as everything's, being demanded to restart, the failures and the changes were going to put even more pressure on you to do more. So it didn't surprise me the works orders were the same. I thought they might have been busier.
Not necessarily busier, but there certainly are companies that are waking up to the fact that they really need some sort of system or a means of tracking everything that's going on in the building, especially mean, I've seen a huge uptick in janitorial and cleaning type companies that are now coming to us looking for a solution to track those things.
So it looks like we have Jim Young. Jim, are you there? Maybe he's having some technical problems. So let us just continue. We'll get back to him. Jim, if you can hear us, when you can just chime in. There seems to be two Jim Youngs there.
My name is Sherry Whittemore, and you might actually be seeing, I apologize if I logged in as Jim and I might need to log off. Jim shared your meeting invite with me just a short while ago. So I'll hop out. I work for Jim. I'm the SVP of Content Strategy, and he thought it'd be beneficial for me to sit in and listen. And so I have a feeling that he hadn't realized that he sent his personal login to me. So I'm going to hop out and email him and let him know so that he can join you.
Thank
Sure.
you. The second Jim Young. Are you the real Jim Young?
I'm trying, guys.
Oh, there he is.
Thank you. How are you doing, Jim?
I'm well, but it's not letting me access my video unless I leave and come back. Should I do that?
And no, let's just continue the discussion here. I would say it'd be nice to see you, but so you see the group here. We've been talking about sort of general sort of issues, but only just started. And the question being posed to this group is a discussion about as a service model in terms of a business model, which is something that this group has been talking about for the past few weeks. And it's really the receptiveness of our target audience, our collective target audience, commercial real estate and the different aspects of it, to as a service models. And wondering if you have a lot of interactions with real estate people of all sorts. Can you sort of paint us a picture of what's going on there in respect to as a service?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And it's great. I see a bunch of people I know, Steve, Ken, Layton, Anno. Good to see everybody. I apologize, my camera's not working. So yeah, we are on the phone with them daily, literally from around the world. So, Australia in and out of this a little sooner, although having problems, the UK, Europe. But at this very moment, my best assessment is they're not thinking about this as a service at all. They've got a couple of things that are pressing them right now. Number one is getting their tenants back into buildings. So for example, New York City, Manhattan, think Hudson Yards, that gargantuan property in New York City. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it was a couple weeks ago, 150 people in that 7-building complex, right? The average occupancy rate in Manhattan right now is hovering around 7 to 8%. Okay, and they're saying 30 to 40. So what there were, and then PS, post or pre-COVID, utilization of commercial office space was at about 40%, which meant 60% was underutilized. Now some people are speculating that post-COVID, only 50% of the people are going to go back into those offices. That could take actual utilization rate in those buildings in the 20 to 25% range. So these office owner operators, and then the other side of our group is the corporate real estate owner operators. Those are the tenants. Think Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Anheuser-Busch, anybody who's got a corporation who needs space. And I don't know if you saw Google's announcement last week, but they said they're not going to send their employees back to the office till June, July of 2021, right? So now all these building owner operators in Manhattan are saying, well, are you coming back to your 100,000 square foot Manhattan regional office? So there's a lot of confusion going on right now. And yes, they're still interested in our world, the smart building, connected cloud, as a service, business model. But these days, if you might have needed a shotgun, or not a shotgun, but a rifle with a good scope, I mean, to get your tenant or your clients right now, you need to have a laser focus on making sure you're dealing with the right customers who have the wherewithal, budget, and capacity to focus on this at this exact moment in time. It's going to change, but right now they're scrambling.
Yeah, so just to clarify one thing, the context of the as a service discussion is not really what's going on right now. It's kind of more of a sort of long-term sort of direction, just to clarify.
Yeah, long term, as most of the people on this phone know, they went from a proprietary, multiple disparate systems, one vendor, to this idea that they were going to go to this integrated approach. The network was going to become a viable component of that, and then eventually, last 3, 4, 5 years, the conversation quickly went to cloud as a service. Then the ambiguity started to seep back and saying, well, we can't have 10 cloud service providers going in their own direction. That takes us away from this integrated approach where data is being shared openly. So I would say that the earliest adopters in our world are the ones on the ground trying to figure this all out. Oh, and P.S., now they got 5G and CBRS to worry about because they're getting hit on that front. And they're, by the way, asking us, in fact, I've been on 3 1-hour plus calls with some 5G CBRS experts, and nobody has yet been able to give me an answer on how all of these multiple building automation systems, some are old, some are new in the building, some are cloud, how they're all going to integrate with the telecommunications infrastructure that people want to stuff inside of a building. So the shortest answer is there's a lot of ambiguity right now, a lot of confusion. Start with COVID, take our industry going from proprietary on-prem to cloud as a service, then throw in 5G. There's a lot of ambiguity and questions right now. And I don't know, I see some of you guys nodding your heads. I don't know if that's making sense to you, but what we're hearing from our biggest owners and operators are they are moving forward, but the story is not getting any simpler.
Open it up to the group. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, I was just going to ask a question, Jim, was that, our feeling was there's going to be a lot of theater up front, people wiping down desks and lots of janitorial things going on, but do you actually see longer term that some of the, there's going to be a demand for different sorts of technologies, which is actually utilizing the data that is becoming available? Because I think right now it's a panic to get back, but, maybe medium term, there might be more services being demanded, for safety and well-being.
Well, you're absolutely spot on. There's a ridiculous amount of theater. All the carny hucksters are out in full force, trying to convince people that they need to spend, $5 million to totally retrofit their HVAC systems. First of all, our guys don't have the budgets. They didn't have the budgets before COVID, and they're not going to do anything major. In fact, a lot of the owners chose to keep the buildings open through this whole thing because once they close the building, they're basically going against the lease and their tenants can default. Okay, so they've done everything and anything just to keep the doors open. Second point is a lot of them are doing the bare bone minimum because they don't want to take any risk or any liability of a tenant walking through their lobby getting to their office. So if I'm Google, I have 100,000 square feet in Manhattan, and I've taken responsibility for my office. I'm doing all these things. The building owners, they're saying, I'm not taking temperatures. That's the tenant's responsibility. So there's two camps right now. Some are really trying to figure it out and do the protocols, the social distancing, the mask, the temperature taking, the thermal, this new device that takes apparently your temperature, your blood pressure, and your heart rate. It's a kind of a scanner like you see at security in an airport. And so there's really a mixed bag of these guys saying, I'm going all in. And then the other side seems to say, I'm not doing much at all because I don't want to risk any liability or exposure.
Jim, what about resources for these guys? Are they letting engineering folks go, keeping them on, adding to them? What's the general?
Well, I haven't seen any blanket layoffs yet. Everybody seems to be keeping everybody gainfully employed. And the engineers are being asked to do some, reasonable protocols, take temperature, you're not sick, nobody in your house has it, before you go back into a building. In fact, Intelligent Buildings is, I don't know if you guys have seen it, has worked on a protocol for third-party resources to get back in the building. We're going forward with Realcomm and IBCOM. The press release is going out tomorrow. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because that's going to be an indication to us, at least, on how engaged they are on our topic, right? Because everybody says they're engaged, but then they got to jump off the call to go to the meeting about, getting tenants to pay rent, right? So again, I think the shortest answer is they are absolutely focused on getting people back into the office so they pay their rent, so they don't default on their loans. And then I've not seen any mass layoffs or reduction, but my gut tells me the majority of them, especially the ones kind of coming into the Realcomm IBCOM world for the first time, they're deer in headlights. Our crew, our world is still focusing and moving forward, but not at the same speed that they were in February.
So Jim, hey, it's Mark. Hey, how you doing?
Mark.
My question for you then is, is your answers or your insight the same for a real estate type property or group of properties versus corporate owned?
Oh, two different worlds. You're talking about yin and yang, and in some cases foes. Okay, so imagine a building owned in New York City by a commercial landlord, and he's got 10 floors. He's got 10 tenants, one on each floor. Google, Accenture, Wells Fargo, right? And they each take a floor. Those people are saying, we're figuring out how to work from home. We're going to keep paying our rent for now. But when that rent renewal comes up, we're probably not going to take 100,000. We may take 25 or 50, right? And so, and that really hasn't happened yet because everybody's paying their rent. These big companies, are big companies. They got money in the bank, so they can pay rent even though there's nobody going to their offices. They're still working from home. So the viewpoint is the landlords want everybody back into the office like it was January 2020. Commercial or corporate, I should say, or the tenants are really starting to wonder, even after COVID, how many people are going to go back to those offices. Forget COVID, think 2-hour commutes on subways and trains, hard to find parking, late nights. I mean, we're still going to need offices. Nobody's disputing that. But they know that those offices that those people go back to are going to be significantly different than they were in January of this year. Cube farms, boring kitchens, people slobbering all over the coffee pot. In a COVID world, those things aren't going to work anymore. But even in a post-COVID world, I think you're going to see a lot of corporations, tenants, right-size their real estate needs. So in other words, maybe I don't need 100,000, maybe I need 75. But then some people argue, well, but with social distancing, you got to go right back up to 100. That story hasn't played itself out yet. And so the big thing we're seeing right now is the tenants figuring out how many people are going back to the office when they go back, how safe and well do those buildings need to be. And the landlords are hoping and praying that it's enough that they keep paying their rent. Did that answer your question?
Sort of, yes,
Okay.
sort of.
Ask it in another way and I'll answer it in 30 seconds.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
It's a very complex world right now, as you can imagine.
Well, I'll throw this at you. All right, how's this? So in certain segments of the market, let's say those that are really under the gun for compliance and mandates, i.e. financial, others, whatever, that do you see the same, what you just said for those types of segments where compliance and mandates and mandatories and requirements, regardless of this environment we're in, still are on the table that they have to meet?
So I was just on the phone with Wells Fargo, okay? Big corporate tenant, lots of offices around the country, corporate headquarters, regional headquarters, small retail, banks. 300,000 employees, I think. So they're a major tenant. And what they're confronted, literally, I was just on this call 2 calls ago. And we actually have a webinar tomorrow. Sherry, or I don't know if you're still on, but I'll get you the date, Mark, and everybody. We're going to have 4 lawyers on the phone, on the webinar, talking about the legal issues of getting people back into these offices, right? So one of the lawyers is from Wells Fargo. And one of the conversations we were having is what they're up against is they got local laws, mayors, cities, they got county laws, and they got state laws, and then in some cases, federal guidance. So there are many cases where a Democratic mayor and a Republican governor don't see eye to eye. So these tenants, in addition to trying to figure out COVID, are trying to figure out what their legal liabilities are based on the conflicting stories they're hearing from the local governments and the state governments. Okay, so what's their answer? Employees just stay at home until we figure this out. And so that's what they're dealing with right now. That's why Google, I think, there's the webinar right there. Thanks, Sherry. That's what these big tenants are dealing with. They're just saying, you know what? Until we feel we can get these tenants or our employees back into these buildings safely, we're going to take the easy way out, which is just stay working at home.
You seem to be saying, Jim, that this is going to roll on for a long time because as people's leases finish and they want to reduce, obviously that's going to be staggered over the next 1, 2, 3, whatever lease period they had, years. So this could roll on for a significant amount of time, this uncertainty. Huh?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, there's the science. We're not even close to a science solution yet, and you say, well, if you look around the world, Australia's popping back up. Parts of Europe are popping back up. We're seeing this thing cycle back. So the science is unsure. And the most common question I ask anybody who's willing to give me an answer is, what inning are we in? Using a baseball metaphor, a 9-inning game. And on my call with the lawyers, I had to change my question. What inning of what game? The World Series, meaning it's a 7-series game. And so I don't even think we're out of the first game yet, right? And so this is going to be a complex, and here's the problem. Every day that we don't go back into these offices, people are learning to work virtually better and better. And yes, people got kids at home, they got a husband and wife trying to work out of home, but every day that we're not in buildings, these people are getting used to this new world. So that's why we're anxious to get back into buildings and why we're having our event. It's going to be half virtual and half hybrid. We got a team of system integrators and MEPs and architects literally going to the Gaylord Rocky Hotel on Wednesday. And then a bunch, and anybody who wants to be involved with this, let me know, and you'll be invited to the virtual event. A lot of this is coming out of the integrator roundtable out of IBCOM. And so the people in place are going to be walking around, looking into air conditioning ducts, touching elevators, figuring out how we can do things touchless. And the goal there is to let these really smart group of your community walk a building and come back with some additional recommendations that we can say to people, for the end of October, we've done everything humanly possible to make sure that this venue is as safe as can be, never eliminate all the risks. But we got to figure out how to get back into buildings sooner rather than later. And if we just keep waiting, this could go on years.
So your treating this, and I think it's very smart, almost like an experiment. I hate to use that word.
No, it is. It is an experiment, yes.
Interesting.
Our conference is going to be an experiment. The majority of the sessions, you know, everything from digital signage and, you know, the traditional things we talk about, that's going to be on the virtual side. Speakers from all over the world, no risk, you know, other than you get bored. And then the physical event will cross over on the Wednesday, and those who are ready, willing, able, and feel confident will jump on airplanes, and then we're gonna present the results of this journey in our opening session. You know, this is what we found. You know, and I mean, to give you an example, I've been in 7 states during this whole thing. I've been visiting different sites in Arizona and Texas, trying to figure out where we could find a building that would meet the local government requirements and the governor's requirements for large events. It took us 2.5 months to find Denver, right? Well, in that journey, Howard and Lisa both got on airplanes. Everybody said, "You guys got on airplanes?" And I told Lisa and Howard, I said, "Make sure you document everything from the time you check in, security, and as soon as we get to Phoenix, I want you to show me the pictures." I drove because it was close and I wanted to see what the driving experience would be. And when they got there and we sat down for that first glass of wine, I said, "Show me the pictures." They go, "Jim, it was uneventful. We wore a mask, we sat in an airplane, everybody was well behaved, it was boring, nothing to report." But still to this day, most people think flying is like, you know, super dangerous. There's risk, always is. So yeah, we're gonna document this whole thing. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. But again, I can't sit around and wait till the economy, the building industry, the commercial corporate real estate industry, if we don't figure out how to get back into buildings at least a little bit in 2020, then all of us are going to be in a lot of hurt for the next 3 to 5 years.
Hey, Jim, this is Alper. You mentioned on the cloud services, you mentioned about disconnected proliferation of cloud services. Could you iterate that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys have all been on the journey with us every step of the way. In fact, you guys initiate many parts of the journey. So we went from proprietary, you know, disparate systems physically in buildings. They didn't talk to each other there. I saw Steve Fay and John and Teresa Tridium 20 years ago said, "Hold on, we're going to come in and we're going to integrate all these disparate systems in the building." 10, 15 years ago, we started talking about cloud, and then all of a sudden people started understanding the benefit of that. Johnson, Honeywell, Siemens ignored us for the last 3 to 5 years. That's changing in the last 3. They're coming in. And so we don't want to see everybody say, "Yeah, now we're all going to the cloud, but you're going to go to the Honeywell cloud here or the Siemens cloud here," because now we got these data. Now the data was in isolated lakes in the building. Now it's in isolated lakes in the cloud. That doesn't service the purpose of this integrated approach that we've been pushing for 20 years. So as long as the cloud and these services are done correctly with an open architecture, open APIs, everything's good. But if everybody starts closing the doors, then we're right back to where we started in a more efficient method with telecommunications. So we want to make sure we keep this open, integrated, interoperable conversation at the forefront of any architecture, whether it's on-prem, and 5G, CBRS is adding a whole new layer of telecommunications to this. In fact, I don't know if I can share a screen. I'll show you the latest iteration of our, I don't know how close you guys are paying attention to CBRS and 5G, but it is also coming.
You should be able to share your screen.
Okay, so this is the last iteration of my call. It's ugly, but you guys will get a sense of, tell me when you can see that.
Yeah.
So this is the telecommunication layer of our world, right? And so we start with a BLE device that your tenant walks into with a sensor, a running shoe. That's BLE. Then you got Bluetooth devices, keyboard, mouse, speakers. These are all the CBR issues that came about as of my call last week. Then you got macro cell towers, that's the old world. Then you got in-building DAS, CBR shared spectrum. And then you got all these new kinds of small towers, femtocells, picocells, microcells that go to networks. And PS the network, core network, the Nokia, Ericsson, those guys are all changing. They're going from proprietary fixed systems to software as a service. Samsung just announced, Ericsson just announced. It's a rat's nest. That's all I can say. Because now all you guys, and you see building automation, one of the goals, yeah, building automation systems. In addition to people using their cell phones, we want all these systems to be able to take advantage of this new telecommunications architecture, this whole IoT world that we've been talking about for 6 years now. Well, it's not real yet. I mean, it is, but there's still a million ways that you can get that watch, that watch I'm wearing that talks to my cell phone, that it either goes 802.11 or Bluetooth or BLE or something to the local communication device up to the cloud. So there's a whole communication layer here that we're trying to sort out amongst all this other craziness.
Hey, Jim, this is Tracy Markey. You made the comment that as these technologies are coming into buildings, are they coming in as subscription services or certain, some kind of as is service then?
It's so early. I mean, just to give an example, Facebook is trying to, put it, and they've got a pretty aggressive building automation, smart building strategy. They want their own personal phone network in the Facebook campus running CBRS. And then all the employees run on the Facebook, not Verizon, not AT&T. They don't want to work on that network. But the minute you walk out the front door, I'm a Facebook person. I want that call to automatically switch from my own personal cellular network to the Verizon AT&T network. And so there's big battles being put in right now. They're being formed. The sides are taking each of their positions. And we all know 5G is the future. It's going to be much more of a participant in the building automation conversation, but it's a rat's nest. Right now, I've had some of the best 5G CBRS people on the phone, and I can't get answers from them. I keep telling them, these are my goals. I want 3, 4, 5G phones to work. I want my smart IoT watch to work. I want my Wi-Fi laptops to work. I want the sensors that I put in for COVID to work. I want all my disparate local and cloud-based building automation systems to be able to integrate. And then I want to possibly offer some tenant services. Nobody can say they can do this yet.
I guess my question was more about the business model than the technology. Are they being presented to owners as a service, or are these all big CapEx purchases that owners
These are big CapEx purchases for the moment. They're trying to get me on a call with the CEO of Verizon because they still don't want to invest. They still don't want to invest in the infrastructure. And it's this, I wish I was on camera. I'm pointing 2 fingers at each other. For 15 years now, building owners saying it's your responsibility, and the mobile carriers are saying it's yours. And they did the high profile projects, but they're not doing the rest of the world. So as of right now, it's a big CapEx expenditure and we're at a standstill.
So Jim, back to your point about not knowing where the answers are, where are the building owners, if it's not you or your services, where are the building owners going now for trying to find some of these answers? How are they going to find answers?
They're not. Okay. I mean, you're talking about the smart building conversation? Yeah. No, I'm on the phone with BOMA, IFMA, IRM, all the guys that have been slower to adopt in our industry. Many of them are simply looking at how to survive right now. They're not doing any forward-leaning conversations. I've watched a number of their virtual events in the last month. They're not very compelling. I love them all, but the content is somewhat dated, in my opinion. And nobody's talking at the level that we talk on this stuff.
So just to a heads up, Jim, this group has been, as I mentioned, talking about sort of the direction sort of post-COVID, whenever that is, for quite a number of weeks. So we're talking about, to some extent, some of the technology issues, but to a broader extent, talking about the more of the sort of the business model side of things and the likelihood or the the openness to as a service model.
Well, and not to make a picture, but I know a lot of you guys on this call, you're part of our community. We've been in this battle together for 20 years.
Right.
I would encourage you to join our journey. I have no idea where it's going. I have no idea what direction the road's going to take, but hell or high water, we're going to put together a combined virtual and physical event called a hybrid with a crossover day. And we are going to start crawling around air conditioning vents, touching elevators with Q-tips, and installing access control systems that take your heartbeat, right? And so we don't have any answers right now, but we are going to try to get some questions answered by the end of October. And
so I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of the group that we're very open to be part of that journey. Please do let us know how we can do that. And
I'm gonna, if you can get me anybody on this call or who you want to have invited to at least do the virtual walkthrough with us on Wednesday. You guys are all invited. In fact,
we'll follow up with email. Okay. And I think you're doing a very sort of interesting move with a hybrid approach. Please do update us, either yourselves or somebody else from the team over the next few weeks about what's going on.
And on the virtual side, we killed ourselves for the last 2 months. Right. I watched more bad virtual events than I care to admit. And I believe our platform is going to make an attempt, whether or not we're successful, I don't know. We're going to make an attempt to make that thing more engaging than simply texting somebody and saying, do you want to learn about my product? It's a lot of video, a lot of technologies you guys may not have seen yet. We actually have got the person modifying the platform for us because it wasn't engaging enough. I'm as digital, I've been doing this for 25 years, but I still think there's a real value in getting people together in buildings. Hence the hybrid. So.
Okay, so we're well past the top of the hour.
Yeah, I apologize. I got to jump to another call. But thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much, and wish you well on the hybrid, and look forward to updates. So with that,
you guys be well.
We're going to wrap up this today's show. It's been a really interesting show, and the video will be up on YouTube later on today, and we will see you next week on Monday Live. Yay. Bye-bye.
Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.